Hi, everyone, and thanks for paying attention. Today, we're going to talk about how to approach preparing for the boards. Go ahead and scan the QR code, pause the video, and press play when you're done with the survey. So by the end of this talk, you're going to be able to do two things. The first is generate a diagnostic and therapeutic framework for test-taking hurdles. The second is to create a SMART goal for boards preparation. I want to start by talking about what the in-service training exam is, the ITE. So at UCLA, this exam is conducted once during your PGY2 and once during your PGY3 year. For MedPeds, I believe it happens in your PGY4 year as well. We do not offer it to interns. And so the way to interpret your score is that if you score greater than 40th percentile on your ITE, it is a good predictor that you will pass your boards. If you score less than 40th percentile, like I did in all 3 years of my residency, you still have a great chance of passing. You just have some work to do. MixApp, for those who don't know, is very similar to UWorld. It's a service through ACP that provides test prep in the form of written chapters and a question bank. A new version comes out every 2 years, and it's paid for by the program. If you get it in your intern year, you will not get the newest version in your third year. Please do not share your digital MixApp accounts. This is the way you can track your own progress through your test taking journey. So I want to frame test-taking hurdles in 3 major buckets. The first is impaired time management. The second is getting stuck between choices. And the third is decreased focus. So if any of these resonate with you and you struggle with tests, fantastic. We have some work to do and we can work on it. For those who are like, I got this, I don't need any help, I still think it's helpful to articulate your framework because A, you may be able to help others, and B, this framework applies to way more than just test taking. I would be remiss if I did not include a very common quote used in any clinical reasoning exercise. A problem well stated is a problem half solved. If we are able to articulate why we are struggling with taking tests, we can overcome them. Let's start with impaired time management. I want you to go ahead and pause and discuss what your differential diagnosis might be for why someone might have impaired time management. These are some of the things that stuck out to me when I was going over this differential. Sometimes people take way too long reading the STEM. And so if you read the question first, it can speed up how you read the STEM because you're looking for particular things. The other thing is if you deliberate too much on one question for a long time, you then run out of time and maybe you get through 53 instead of 60 questions. Now go ahead and pause and talk about what you might do to work up this differential. Press play when you're ready. I think a good way to do this is to time how long each question takes, and not on average, but each question. Then you can kind of look at the type of question being asked and how long each one of those takes. Go ahead and pause again and discuss what types of therapeutic interventions you might do to address this issue. So some examples are if you set a goal for X number of questions in Y minutes, 40 questions in 60 minutes, 10 questions in 20 minutes. Another thing you can do is to mark questions to circle back with fresh eyes. Do not do this with every question because it defeats the purpose of the exercise. And the final thing is a pro tip, which is if you open up your lab references, it actually halves the screen. And so you don't have to, your eyes don't have to scan all the way across the screen to read the vignette. And so it will reduce eye fatigue. Let's move on to being stuck between choices. Go ahead and pause and come up with a differential for why this might happen. Some common things that I see is misinterpretation of the question, having an issue with finding the relevant detail in the STEM, and an issue with the fund of knowledge. The first two are test-taking 101s for people who are very good at standardized tests, and the rest of us struggle with this. The issue with fund of knowledge is very, very rarely the actual problem, but it is something that you need to make sure that you don't have. Go ahead and pause again and talk about what you might do to further work this up. Press play when you're ready. I think you have to reflect on your rationale for each answer choice, and this includes the questions answered correctly. You'll notice that when we debrief with you in simulation, we ask you questions based off of what we observe. I noticed you ordered dopamine. What was going through your mind? It's not that dopamine was the right or wrong choice. We want to see why you chose it. And I think the same thing applies here. Go ahead and pause again and talk about what you might do to therapeutically improve this situation. I think this is where you need someone who is very good at test taking. And so you have to discuss questions with a trusted colleague or faculty member. I'm happy to be that person with you. Feel free to reach out to me directly. And then, if this really is an issue with fund of knowledge, you have to read references for specific fund of knowledge issues. So that's the point of MixApp Tracker, and it'll help you identify areas where you need to read more. The final main bucket is decreased focus. So go ahead and pause and come up with a differential. So I'm going to break it down into 3 buckets, and they all overlap: physical health, mental health, and decreased stamina. Residency is very hard and taxing on all 3, of course. Go ahead and pause again and discuss what further workup you might do. Go ahead and press play when you're ready. And this requires reflection like everything else. You have to think about what's stressing you out, your sleeping habits, and your pre-test hygiene. Some people drink half a bowl of lukewarm soup before their test. Others will eat 3.5 saltine crackers. It just depends on who you are. There are a lot of stressors you cannot control in life, unfortunately, but there are definitely some that you can, and those are the ones you have to focus on. Pause one more time and think about what therapeutic interventions you might do. This is where you have to practice sets of questions on MixApp to build endurance. So on the actual test, it is 4 sets of 60 questions, 240 questions total. Each set of 60 questions is allotted 2 hours of time. So 2 minutes per question. You get a total of 10 hours to take the test, 8 hours of testing, and 2 hours of breaks. So practice taking breaks. Don't forget to bring snacks and water. And practice sleep hygiene. I think it's something we often do poorly because we are always doom scrolling. But things like the Balance app or any meditation app can really help with that if you're really focused on that. Let's pivot to SMART goals. Those of you who don't know what a SMART goal is, here it is in nice bold font. It's specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and timely. Here's some example of SMART goals for boards prep. Through my next inpatient block, I will complete 5 MixApp questions per week. You may say, well, that's not that many. Let me do 20. How many of you have successfully done 20 questions per week consistently on an inpatient block? Probably none of you. Make the goal small, make it achievable, and be consistent. Another example is through my next inpatient block, I will keep a list of 1 to 2 learning points per week based on the MixApp questions that I complete. Again, you may say this is not that many. If you start early and are consistent, you build a good habit and you accomplish a lot. So I would love for all of you to do now is in the next 5 minutes or less, create a SMART goal and put a recurring reminder on your phone to achieve that goal. So go ahead and pause here and do that. This is an example of a reflection sheet. So in past years, I've sort of talked about how you log your questions, and this may be one way that you can consider doing it. So you can put the date that you did the question, the category, because that can help you identify it, and some of the takeaways. So here's a brief overview of some of my notes from when I took my ITE or my boards, and that's why you can see it's in 2017 when I was in R3. You can do the same for takeaways in terms of why you missed a question. It's not always just a fund of knowledge thing. So the key takeaways I have here are: do not share digital MixApp accounts because that's how you track your own journey through this. If you self-identify as someone with test taking issues, spend time reflecting to diagnose the cause. And you should aim to complete a higher number of questions per week if you're going into fellowship. So there are 1,200 questions in the MixApp question bank. And you can take your boards usually in August. That first month of fellowship is not going to have much time to allow you to complete questions. So if you want to save 200 questions for that month and do 5 a day, I think that's reasonable, but you got to get the bulk of them done. If you're an R2 and know you struggle with this, please only do a few questions at a time. You don't want to eat up the MixApp questions because then you won't have enough to practice. So you have to do just enough to identify what issues that you have. Again, if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me at my MedNet email. I want you all to remember that not doing well on this test is not a reflection of the quality of doctor that you are. You're all wonderful human beings and incredible physicians, which is why you are at UCLA for residency. And so I just want you to remember that and keep pushing through. Thank you all for your attention. please go ahead and fill out the post-session survey and enjoy the rest of your day. Thanks so much.